alive! So that was a lot of fun, and I'd like to break the sounds down for you. We'll get into the bass sounds, and I'm going to start with the lead sound, which was definitely fun to play. It was really hard. Edgar Winter is a monster keyboard player. It took me a couple days, to be honest with you, to figure out how to get all that nuance into the part. And he's got some fingerings on there that don't fit my hand. I mean, he must be thinking like a guitar player, but I mean, he's an amazing keyboard player too. Maybe he's just thinking like the best musical line, and then he figures out how to finger it. So that aside, let's break down the actual, tone color of the sound, because it's pretty interesting. And I even broke out the old keyboard because I noticed the way the pitch bends were working. I couldn't do it with the new with the newer ARP 2600 keyboard, because that pitch bend wheel goes positive and negative. It doesn't have a detent, so you don't really know where the center is. And then it's exponential, so it sort of takes off on you. This is a very linear curve. And it also has a not really a center point, but like a 0 point at the bottom. So you can have your basic pitch and then go up from there. So I had to use this keyboard in order to do it. The sound, I came close to his sound. I kind of did my version of it. I don't know if he went through a guitar amp or not. You certainly could do that, and I always advise doing that. I used the oscillators without any patch cords, the ones that are normaled to the filter. So we have a square wave from VCO1, a pulse wave from VCO2, and that pulse wave is getting pulse width modulation from the ADSR envelope generator. This would be the patch. Now, it says noise generator modulating the pulse width. I already hardwired it. It's a mod that I have in my ARP 2600, which I guess I forgot in my mod video to mention. But it's ADSR going there, because that's most of the time what I'm doing with the pulse width modulation, other than maybe an LFO. So that's the patch for that oscillator. Then we move on to oscillator 3. It's a sawtooth waveform coming from this oscillator 3 to the filter. And then I'm modulating the filter with an envelope generator that has a pretty slow decay time to this sustained voltage, and that's it. And then quick release, no attack, just a quick attack, so there's no slow attack time. And then right out of the VCF, I go right to the mixer. So there's a straight sound, and here's what it sounds like. Not so awesome. So what I did is I took the output of the filter and ran it through my Strymon AA1, which is, it gets the signal ready for a pedal, and then I have this crybaby with the TDK chip in it, and it's the wah pedal that I use on this. And now you'll hear a big difference. So you can get some expression. But one thing I like to do is mix dry signal in. So I have the wet signal, which is with the wah pedal, but I add this signal to it, so it doesn't get affected by the wah pedal. So what it's doing is adding body to the sound. So when the wah changes, you're always getting this constant tone. So you get fundamental and pitch. And then here's the wah without it. And then together. You hear that icing on top? So there's like a little bit of buzz. I'll make it more drastic. Without it. A lot thinner. So I added more. I usually go a little more subtle, but these are the things that you notice that I do a lot. I take a sound, you might process it, but then I add like straight signal or something that's not messed up, and you put them together and you get a more complex, more interesting thing, like sounds that are more like in the real world. So I just wanted to be sure you guys can hear the difference, because it gives you like a real synthy kind of sound added to this. So you lose the pitch. When you put them together, I love it. As I said earlier, running it through a guitar amp or a little bit of distortion could be nice, but it's very expressive, and having the wah pedal allows it to be, instead of just like, you get. Lots of expression. So that's the sound I used for the lead. I have to give it to Edgar Winter. That was a crazy solo. I hope you enjoyed it. Let's move on to some breakdowns of the other sounds. There's 2 layers. So there's the lead solo, and then there's a bass double that goes throughout the song. So let's break down the bass. The bass is an interesting one. The way I had to make it, because it has vibrato on it, that comes in at certain points, at certain notes. So I have 3 oscillators. So now I don't have a keyboard that has an LFO on it. So I have now 2 oscillators that are in audio, and I'm using oscillator 2 as an LFO. So I'm able to have oscillator 1 square wave playing at this pitch, and oscillator 3 sawtooth playing an octave up. So I put them together, play them a little lower, and I get a pretty nice bass sound. And then the way I get vibrato to come in and out is to go to 2 oscillators, right? So I have a low frequency sine wave from oscillator 2 that goes through this fader. So it's like an attenuator. And then the output goes to a mult, and then I send it to oscillator 1 and oscillator 3 frequency modulation input. So I'm modulating oscillator 1 and oscillator 3 with the low frequency sine wave from oscillator 2. That's how you do it. So when you play a note and then move the slider, you get vibrato. So there you go. I'll give you an example of how to bring the vibrato in. So at will, I can use this fader to bring in the vibrato. Not quite as handy as having it down here on my left side, like on a Mini Moog or on the ARP with the old keyboard, but it works perfectly fine. And that's what you have to do when you have older synthesizers. You know, there's more patching usually. In Moog modulars, there's lots of patching, And with these synths, before they brought in the new keyboard, there was more patching involved. And then the rest of the sound in the filter have a little bit of resonance. I have the envelope generator modulating the filter. It's important to have a decay that's about, medium length to this sustain level. And you can see it visually. It decays and then it drops to this sustain level. I'll show you different sustain levels. So you can, when you make your envelopes, you can do this wherever you want your sustain to be. So you get your decay, and then where do you want the sustain? There. Sounds good. And then that's where it'll live until you release the note. Otherwise it'll be and done. So let's put it around there. And then I'm not using the VCA. I'm just going straight out. And there's one other cable going nowhere. But what it's doing is it's blocking the keyboard control voltage, and I'll show you the difference. See how it gets really bright up there? So if I don't have keyboard control voltage, automatically that note just went way down in brightness. Without it, too bright. And for bass notes, bass parts in general, I like to have no keyboard control voltage tracking the filter. And if you can, maybe sometimes like half a volt per octave, or a third. And you can do that on a mini Moog. You can adjust the amount of keyboard control voltage, which is a nice feature. It matters a lot to give nuance to the sound. And that's it. That's the bass sound. So let me show you this patch. It's a classic. You need a filter that oscillates, so resonance that generates high enough to create a tone. Here's an example. No resonance, add resonance, you get a tone. The initial cutoff frequency is going to be the center frequency. That's the starting place. The next thing to make the tone color right is to modulate the filter with a low frequency sine wave. So I'm using oscillator 2 sine wave, and if I were to patch it, how about if I do patch it? It's normal to the filter, but I'll patch it. Now you can hear what it sounds like. Now here's what vibrato sounds like. I'm going to give it a very fast vibrato to give it sort of a rub. And that's an important thing for the tone color. So you hear that. Okay, so that's the starting point for the tone color. The next thing is the percussion. The way I do that is use an LFO to fire the ADSR envelope generator. So the ADSR envelope generator has a very quick decay time and nothing else. And I'm going to use that to modulate the filter at the rate of this internal clock. And I'm going to use this internal clock to fire the ADSR envelope generator at that very quick decay time. So now you'll hear what that's sounding like. I'll take out that modifying sine wave in the filter so you can just hear the clock. So that's the ADSR, back to the tone, put them both in. Pretty close, kind of a little mushy still. So what to do? I'm going to take everything we've done here and go into a VCA. So to patch it, put a cable into the filter, into the VCA, and then close the VCA, and fire it with an AR envelope generator. So I have attack and release. So I'm going to let it kind of do its thing. And that's a very tight sound. I'm going to loosen it up a little bit, give it some sustain by slowing down the attack a little and giving some release time. That's tighter. This is a little looser. Now I want percussion. Modulate modulate the VCA with the ADSR envelope generator, and I'm using the exponential input to the VCA. You hear that attack? Here's without it. Attack. So now, when I start up high and come down, I've got that trapping effect. And then when we get down low, I start modulating the filter with the ADSR envelope generator. And I just kind of track the drum solo like this. And if I want to get up a little higher, I move the center frequency by changing the position of the initial filter frequency. And if I want to be lower, I move it down. And then this is the range of change. The ADSR envelope generator modulating the filter. So you start at the top, work your way down, and then when you get down, you modulate the filter with the ADSR envelope generator, and you create a rhythm. It's really fun. This is a classic. It inspired me when I was a teenager to create my own unique sounds that weren't like musical sounds, that were like, you know, simulating a violin or a flute or something like that on synthesizers, because that's how I started. And I thought, wow, this is a whole world. It's imaginative and it pushes the synth into other areas, and it's a great performance. It's a great duo between drums and synthesizer. So I hope you enjoy it, and you can recreate it on your synths if you have a filter that regenerates, if you have an envelope generator that you can trigger from a clock, which you can do if you have an arpeggiator, for instance, and then sine wave modulation to the filter. That's a little bit quicker than a vibrato, and you're good to go. Just follow along. So hope you enjoyed that one. And this is definitely one of my favorites. If you like our videos, please remember to like and subscribe to the channel. It's been a lot of fun today. Also, we're going to be putting out patch sheets on our website, anthonymarinellimusic.com, of all the sound effects that were used in this video, and they were made on the ARP 2600.